Alright guys, so I've been playing Digimon Story Time Stranger pretty consistently over the past couple of months since, as you already know, I did get the game early, and while I did put out a video a couple of weeks ago talking about the things I'd like to see to improve, there is one thing in particular that I think for the vast majority of people is a non-issue. However, if you are someone like me, you're going to find this apparent as the amount of hours you've played starts to creep into the hundreds. Now, I just want to preface all of this by saying that I absolutely love Digimon Story Time Stranger. I think it's a great game and it's well worth the money, and I stand by everything that I've gone over in both my base game and DLC review. However, I'd say that the game has one major flaw that's keeping it from entering God status, and it's something that I've touched on in a previous video, but I'm going to expand upon further now. Now, in order to understand where I'm coming from, it's important to discuss some of the reasons why I and a lot of other people really enjoy Digimon story games, as it will give context to the issue as a whole. So the game is a story-driven RPG. However, the biggest fill for a lot of people is that the game features a robust turn-based combat system, branching evolutionary paths, every Digimon gets access to its own unique special move, and there is a lot of team customization that you're given access to via what I just mentioned, the different attachment skills, equipments, and various other systems within the game. That being said, the game also features a Mega Plus difficulty and skippable cutscenes, giving it that sort of replayability factor. However, when it comes to experimenting with different team builds, the game ends up falling a bit short because of its lack of any sort of true post-game content. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot to do within the game and tons of content. There are a lot of different side quests, you can complete your field guide, etc., but there's no sort of like infinite endgame grind, if you will. You're basically just able to keep battling the Olympus 12 over and over again, rematching some of the outer dungeon bosses, or heading back into the Colosseum and battling enemies you've already defeated. For those that don't already know, they recently put out a patch that fixes one of the bugs that ended up giving rise to a pretty overpowered team build, which consists of abusing the combo magic ability and the stout strength ability, alongside the great embrace ability. And while I have no issues with them fixing this error in the game, as it will give rise to new meta opportunities, one of my gripes with actually exploring some of these new opportunities is that most of the bosses in Mega Plus are absolute fodder to a maxed out team, meaning that if you want to experiment with a particular team build, you're going to essentially have to get to a certain point in Mega Plus difficulty on a New Game Plus playthrough, and I guess save scum from there, or you'll have to keep battling the game over and over again, which can get really stale really fast. Most of the enemies in Mega Plus that are not bosses are essentially just punching bags, and you have to spend a lot of time navigating through a bunch of different areas over and over again. That can end up soaking a lot of extra time. This is totally fine during your first and even second playthrough of the game. However, when you get to the point where you're just experimenting with different builds, it does get a little bit frustrating having to spend a lot of time just knocking out fodder. It might be a little bit better if the game featured a similar New Game Plus system to a Dark Souls game, where essentially the game just keeps getting harder and harder and harder each time you play through it. But even then, I feel like for a JRPG, there's a much better route that they could take that would add some sort of infinite grind and longevity to the game that, unfortunately, if not added, will probably cause a retention fall off after the DLC drop. What I'm talking about here is some sort of boss battle mode where essentially you could pick from a few different difficulty options to start at, and then are thrust into random boss fights that appeared throughout the game, and you'll get scored based on how many you defeat in a row. These bosses will start out relatively manageable and will slowly get stronger over time until essentially they're basically maxed out in every stat, just like the player could be. I feel like something as simple as this would add so much depth to the game and make people want to experiment with more playstyles and team builds, and it would create a competitive aspect to the game since it doesn't have PvP, and honestly could help make the game timeless. We see to this day people still competing to get higher scores in various old games. A pretty good comparison, just because it's also a monster taming RPG, would be something like how Pokemon Emerald's Battle Factory is still popular to this day, and I could definitely see Digimon Time Stranger creating its own sort of niche community around some sort of battle-centric mode with a similar scoring and scaling system. Now, before I get the inevitable comments stating that it's supposed to be a single-player story-driven game, it's not supposed to have any more after you beat it, my answer to that is, why not? If Digimon Story Time Stranger becomes something that people are going to dump hundreds of hours into through optimizing various teams and experimenting with different playstyles and whatnot, this could end up giving birth to even more DLCs since there'll be a higher active player count, and could further propel Digimon as a gaming franchise as well, instead of just a media franchise. I think they did an amazing job with Time Stranger, and I think that something as simple as adding boss battle mode for the purposes of experimentation or just competitive fun could really craft something at that god status I mentioned earlier. Granted, like I said, this is not an issue for most players, but as someone who is trying to experiment with different teams, I definitely would love to see something like this make its way into the game so that I could just put my team against a variety of different bosses without having having to get through all the fodder in between them. That being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Again, this video is not to bash on the game or anything. I know for a fact that people at Bandai actually do watch my videos. After I met them at PAX, it became quite apparent that I got some fans there, so I'm hoping someone sees this and suggests it as potentially some sort of future update. I know, for example, Sekiro did something similar where they added a boss battle mode to the game. And in that game, it wasn't as much of an issue having to go through various New Game Pluses. I think I got to like New Game Plus 8 or something, because you can quite quickly run through different areas, whereas in a JRPG, things tend to take a little more time. So I feel like Time Stranger could really benefit from that. And I mean, in a perfect world, we can get even more different types of battle modes, like a Battle Factory equivalent with like rentals and stuff like that, or some sort of like roguelike dungeon or something. But at the very least, boss battle mode would be very much appreciated. So if you guys agree or not, make sure to comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you'd like to see in terms of post-game content. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all things monster taming. We'll see you next time. Peace.